Happy Monday! Welcome, everybody. It's the Sean O'Connell Show. We got a full week of the Sean O'Connell Show. After the holiday breaks, after my big trip, you got me all 5 days this week. You're welcome or I'm sorry, whichever way you feel about that. Got a fun one lined up for you today. We're going to check in with Scott Mitchell. He'll be joining us in the noon hour. We've also got Josh Newman. Josh Newman covering Texas, obviously, a team that is still involved in the college football playoff. College football playoff games continue this week, and we're not back on a Saturday schedule. So the first game is going to be on Thursday, which I actually like. I don't like that we have to wait a whole extra week once there's only a couple of games on. So this one is a midweek game. Keeps it away from some of the NFL conversation, hopefully, and we'll get into that. So we'll talk a little college football with Josh Newman. Also, he's got some insight on Nate Johnson's return to the University of Utah. So the former Ute, former Commodore, back to being a Ute, Nate Johnson, coming back into the fold, presumably to compete with, and I think eventually back up Devin Dampier, who has, of course, joined Jason Beck in the caravan of New Mexico Lobos who have decided to come to Utah. We spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time talking about, the way the transfer portal has been affecting rosters this last couple of weeks, and we're going to continue to keep an eye on that, although I anticipate it is settling down some because the transfer portal window is closed, which means the guys who declared for now are declared. They're in the transfer portal, and they're committing to and signing at schools and hopefully finding footing in their new schools. And then you don't get another one until the spring cycle. And that one, I think, will be less impactful. I think that one will be less of a rush to find greener grass, even though that's the one that, in my opinion, makes more sense. You should make your decisions, I think, based as a player, based more on your practice time, your practice reps, your conversations with coaches when they're not distracted by bowl preparation, they're not distracted by a high school signing day, they're not distracted by game planning for the season. Like, I think that the spring transfer window, you could build a case for me that the spring transfer window should be the only transfer window, that you should wait until spring football is done, and then you should say, all right, everyone, same time, like you wait until the last spring scrimmage has been played, and then the transfer portal opens. And you have this runway where you don't have to cram in your academic eligibility. You don't have to scramble to prepare for a bowl game or a college football playoff game, as was the case for the University of Oregon, who's incredibly active again in the transfer portal. Doing that, I know you have a separate staff now, but Dan Lanning and his staff, his position coaches, all of whom are leaned on very, very heavily to recruit, just like at the University of Utah, just like at USC, just like at BYU, just like at all these places. But they're preparing for a college football playoff game while they're trying to be the number one player, not a lead player, the number one player in NIL and in the transfer portal, all trying to do this while they're signing a highly rated high school class and preparing for a college football playoff game and re-recruiting their own roster and trying to figure out what to do with the players that are available from other schools. And, of course, when you're Oregon, you're not looking for the, aw shucks, I got a little bit under-recruited and I'm at an FCS team and I had an all-conference season there. You're looking for the guys that you recruited in high school and they went to Ohio State instead. They went to Michigan or Alabama or Georgia instead, and now you're trying to get those bounce backs, and you're trying to do it all at once. That is not a successful formula, in my opinion. The spring transfer portal window is the one, just like it was way cleaner and I think way better when National Signing Day for high school recruits was in February. Putting all of this in early December has created an even bigger mess than we need to have in college football. Is it good for my job? Yeah, I mean, it is, because after the regular season and the conference championship games are done, you can get stuck in this kind of holiday doldrum where you're like, okay, well, now we're talking about NBA games coming up. And what college football has done is they've fast-forwarded and accelerated all this stuff, so now we could talk about it in December. But if you want guys, and college, even college athletics, still should be about preparing people for the real world. If you want to do that, you should be, I think, zooming out and letting these guys slow it down just a little bit and make more informed decisions on their future, on their football future. Spring football is a better time to do that. It just is. Because we should run an experiment on this. We got to find somebody. Zach's producing for us today. Zach, we got to find somebody who's on like the Utah football roster who's a backup, right? Who's somebody that they recruited and they like, but is a backup. And we got to find them to be like a collaborator and a cooperator on a research project we do, where we find out how hard it is December of next year for that individual to get a real sit-down evaluation and one-on-one meeting with the head coach, who I believe will still be Kyle Whittingham in the program, and their position coach. How hard is that on like December 1st for a backup player? I need to know, okay? And if we could get someone to do it at BYU, and we could get someone to do it at Utah State, we could get someone to do it at Arizona State and Oregon and all these different places, that'd be even better, because the coaches don't have as much time, bandwidth, or energy to be dealing with your question as a backup. Hey, am I going to be part of the plans moving forward? They don't have that much time in December to do that. They don't. We just talked about all the things that are on the plate. In the spring football window, you've got guys that's the mode they are in. Yes, they're still in transfer portal mode slightly. Yes, they're still in recruiting mode, obviously, because that never stops. They're not fully in a film study, game plan, bowl prep, anything like that. What they're doing is they're assessing their own roster. They are on the same ground, the same footing that you are as the player when it comes to spring football. Coaches in spring football, and by the way, winter conditioning and winter workouts as everyone comes back to school and is starting now, they're doing all of this together now. The coaches and the players are as on the same page as they can be, as the coaches are watching these players and going, all right, is this guy going to be something I can rely on, something that I can use? And the players are going through the workouts, going through the voluntary practice sessions, going through all of the organized whatever that the NCAA allows, and they are asking themselves the same question. Am I going to be part of this coach's plans moving forward? And now, because the environment has changed so drastically, you're doing that, and instead of evaluating yourself against the 10 guys that were in your position room before, you're doing it and you're trying to evaluate yourself against like 10 dudes, yes, but 5 of them are brand new. It's a bunch of guys you don't know. It's a bunch of guys who came in from New Mexico and a guy who transferred in from BYU and a dude that you kind of remember from playing against him in high school, but he was at Utah State or he went to UNLV or whatever, and now you've got this sort of shifting sand that you're trying to find out where you belong in that new pecking order. At least you're all on the same page, though. At least the coaches and you are trying to figure out the same thing. Spring transfer window should be the number one transfer window, should be where these decisions are made. But we're not going to put that genie back in the bottle either, because coaches and GMs, which is a position that now exists in college football, they want the head start. I don't get it. I'll never get it, but here we are. Sean O'Connell Show today, brought to you by Les Schwab Tires. They've got tires, wheels, accessories, and they've got it for whatever you drive. Stop by the local Les Schwab today. Professionals there will get the job done right the very first time. So I went off on that tangent because we're going to have a conversation with Josh Newman about, you guessed it, college football, and also Nate Johnson coming back to Utah in the transfer portal, which, by the way, is such a wild scenario, and it's not totally unprecedented in college football, and it's certainly not unprecedented in professional sports. But even then, it feels a little bit strange, where guys do the Kyle Van Noy thing, where you build something up with the Patriots, and then you go get the big check from the Miami Dolphins, and then they stink, and they have a little buyer's remorse because they realize that part of what made you so good was you had to be in a good defensive system, and they're just like, oh, geez, all right, well, we can't afford this. We don't run our franchise well. So see you later, Kyle Van Noy. And then you're Kyle Van Noy, and you end up back in the same locker room again. You go back to the Patriots. It's not unprecedented in pro sports, but it's still something that is a little bit, I don't know, curious to observe. And to see it in college sports is really fascinating to me, because as somebody who was not even wanted in a football program, when you transfer out of that football program, the coaches look at you for at least a number of years. They look at you with a little bit of a side eye. It's like, this guy. Or they used to. Now they can't afford to, I guess. This guy, disloyal, quitter, not exactly what, couldn't make the cut here, didn't want to stick it out here, right? You get a little bit of that side eye from the coaches. And now those same coaches who probably were fighting those feelings at the very least when Nate Johnson left, those coaches are now like, yeah, but we do want you back, right? We saw this with Joe Williams when Joe Williams walked away. I promise you, not all those coaches were like, yes, of course, we love you. Please come on back, right? There's always this thing where the old school mentality of college football is going to permeate to a certain level, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that guy didn't want to be here before, and now he wants to be here again. All in or in the way, the all-in aspect on this it's a sliding scale. Yes, you can be all in, but you're probably not as all in as the guys were in 2012, you know? Anyway, Nate Johnson's back. We'll talk about that. Zach, I guess I don't want to spend all this first segment talking about random college football stuff. Bigger news in the sports world today, and I think bigger news certainly here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Your beloved Denver Broncos are back in the NFL playoffs.
I am so happy about it.
Congratulations to you. Congratulations to Bo Nix, who took his victory lap. Congratulations to the Denver Broncos. I do believe still are the number one pro team here in the Salt Lake City market. I think that the largest number of pro football fans or folks who profess their football fandom would say number one is the Denver Broncos. And we conducted a poll on this, right? The Niners are still way up there. But congratulations to all you long-suffering Broncos fans. I am not a fan of the franchise myself. I am happy to see that Garrett Bowles, who is the longest tenured Bronco, Garrett Bowles will play his first career playoff game.
I know. It's kind of crazy, too, to think about, because Garrett Bowles was drafted after they won the Super Bowl. I think it was 2017? 2 years later he got drafted, or was it 2016?
So he's been there. We got to do the math, I guess. But he's the longest-standing Bronco. He's in his 8th season with Denver. Cortland Sutton is the second longest tenured Bronco. And those guys had their moment on the sideline as they realized, oh, my gosh, we're actually going to get to play some postseason football this year. So all you Broncos fans, congratulations. Maybe what we should do is we should turn back the clock. We should play all the hot songs from the last time the Denver Broncos were in the college, or it's not the college football playoffs. You can see where my head is at. The last time the Denver Broncos were in the NFL playoffs. So if we go back to January of, what is that, 2016?
Yeah, 2016.
Yeah, because it was the 2015 season. So the Billboard Top 100, January of 2016. You were like 7 years old at the time, Zach. Don't look it up yet. Don't Google it yet. Can you guess? Can you tell me the number one song? Even if you get a top 5 song from that. Don't look at your screen. Don't cheat. The number one song on the Billboard Top 100 charts in January 2016, the last time the Denver Broncos made the NFL playoffs. Can you guess?
Not really, because I can't remember 2016 songs that well.
I can't remember. I don't remember anything before 5 years ago. If you would have asked me this question, which is unfair, I get to do this because it's the Sean O'Connell show. So I don't actually expect you to know the answer. But because you do control the music back there, if you wanted to, as we bump back in to have some of these discussions, if you wanted to have Hello from Adele, that was the number one song on the charts the last time the Denver Broncos made the NFL playoffs. And by the way, still an absolute banger, an unbelievable song. Adele has staying power like nobody. She is an angel on earth. Love Adele's voice. Number two song on the charts, Justin Bieber, Sorry, right? You can bump us back in with a little Sorry. That's a little higher energy. Adele's Hello is a little too somber and slow probably for the sports talk radio audience. Hotline Bling, Justin Bieber, Love Yourself. And Bieber was just killing it. 3 of the top 5 songs in January 2016 were Justin Bieber songs. What Do You Mean, Love Yourself, and Sorry, 3 of the top 5. So if there's people out there who want to hear the 2016, who want to turn it all the way back to the last time the Broncos made those NFL playoffs, those are the songs you need on your soundtrack today. Hello, Hotline Bling, a bunch of Justin Bieber, and I really think I'm bad with music because 5 of these top 10 songs I don't even recognize, and I'm not even going to tell you what they are because people are going to berate me for not knowing what they are. Also, to reflect the way our taste was back in 2016, January of 2016, the top-rated television show in the United States, The Big Bang Theory. I don't know. I never got on board. Sorry, people.
I didn't either, honestly. I started watching Young Sheldon.
The Walking Dead was still really big back in 2016, another show that I didn't watch. One of the 75,000 NCIS spinoffs. Actually, the NCIS original was good. We did get a season of Stranger Things in 2016, which was amazing. Love me some Stranger Things. So I can get on board with that. And then the number one, this is my favorite one. The number one movie in the United States of America, the last time the Denver Broncos made the college, gosh dang it, stop saying it. The last time the Denver Broncos made the NFL playoffs, Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. Yes! It's all coming together. All you Broncos fans, we're really living your best life coming off an incredible season, Super Bowl season, and watching the revamped, relaunched Star Wars franchise and listening to some heartfelt ballads from Adele. You're welcome, Bronco fans. Bo Nix and company brought you all the way back to your glory days of the 2015 season, early 2016. And Bo Nix, by the way, was a guy that before we really called it the transfer portal the same way we do now, was someone who was exploring this potential, right? He was one of the early success stories of what has now become the norm in college football. A guy highly recruited, big-time commit, successful, great player at Auburn, but was just missing that one thing. And thankfully for him, Oregon was also missing that one thing that they needed, a happy marriage. Bo Nix transfers to Oregon. And I can tell you from interviewing Bo Nix a couple of times down at Pac-12 Media Days when Oregon was a member of the Pac-12, this is a guy who knew what was happening in college sports. He knew what he was seeing on the landscape, and he knew that he could be part of this new wave, which has now become the norm, which has now become like the structure of how everyone does it. He could be one of those guys that kind of helped to pioneer in this era of excellent college football opportunity where he maximized everything he could do at an SEC school that at one time was a dyed-in-the-wool SEC power and has since kind of fallen out of those graces. And even stepping into the unknown from the SEC to a Pac-12 that was a little bit shaky at the time, Bo Nix was one of these guys who had it all planned out. And credit to his parents, credit to his coaches, credit to everyone who kind of built this guy into what he is. But, man, Bo Nix is like a rookie quarterback who was not the highest regarded among his class and just had this business-like approach going all the way back to when he was a young quarterback at Auburn and saw the opportunity at Oregon and realized that Oregon was going to help him get to where he wanted to be. He was going to get to play a ton of college football, and he did. Bo Nix got, because of that COVID year, Bo Nix got more starts than anybody in the history of college football at the quarterback position. And that experience, his level of professionalism, his buy-in, and his leadership has now got the Denver Broncos back to the playoffs. So all of you out there rejoicing in that, congratulations. I count me among the fans wallowing in misery because my favorite NFL team did not make the playoffs this year. Inexplicably, the San Francisco 49ers, with a star-laden roster, just continued to lay eggs this year and stink. So they're out of the playoffs, and you've got a complete revamp coming, probably starting along the lines of scrimmage for the San Francisco 49ers, and a decision has to be made about Brock Purdy. And I think what's going to be the decision that's going to be made is ultimately the wrong one about Brock Purdy, but nothing we can do about that now. So I'm not jumping on your bandwagon, Zach. I'm not jumping on the Broncos bandwagon, but I am saying it's cool to see shifting sands in the NFL where different fan bases are served by the changing of tides. And to see Garrett Bowles, who signed another big contract in his 8th year with the Broncos, to see him finally get an opportunity to play some postseason football is gratifying for anyone who followed his career at the University of Utah. Because even though it's easy for all of us to say, oh, well, look, it's no matter what, it's a success when you make a lot of money. These guys are still competitors. These guys still want to win. These guys still, yes, the money is wonderful, right? Yes, the money is something that at the end of the day, when they get to provide for their families and they get to, add the benefit of generational wealth, perfect educational opportunities, all this stuff for their children and for their posterity, and oftentimes for siblings and friends and aunts and uncles and parents and everything else. Like, that is truly a great and wonderful thing. It absolutely is. But when you talk about satisfaction and self-actualization, the top of that needs pyramid, these guys want to win. And these guys want to win meaningful football games. So when you've checked all the boxes of, well, I have food, I have a roof over my head, my family's safe, everyone's healthy, all this is good, and I've been able to spread that love around a little bit, that's great. These athletes, these pro athletes, these people who you can't buy them anything because they can buy everything for themselves. What do you get the man or the woman? What do you get for the person who has everything? Well, in the case of somebody whose career has gone like Garrett Bowles' career has gone, what you get for that guy is you get him an opportunity to compete for something meaningful. You get him an opportunity to win playoff football games, to chase a championship. And the Broncos are not going to win a championship. They're not.
No, I agree, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
But for them to be taking this step before it's too late for Garrett Bowles, for them to be taking this step and for the future to look like it looks with Bo Nix at the helm, with Bo Nix taking the snaps, with maybe them adding his adopted brother in an offseason. It is a possibility that the Broncos could go out and get Tez Johnson, who was his teammate at the University of Oregon. Like, the story can get happier and can continue, and there is a glimmer of light and hope for all of you NFL fans who, maybe jumped off the Broncos bandwagon in the 9 years since you've last made a playoff game.
Yeah, and to your point with Bowles, like him still being a part of the Broncos, that's loyalty, you know. And to your point with Joe Williams, he came back because of loyalty, and his body and mind were right, you know. So I think it's a good thing that Bowles is still with the Broncos. I mean, he had his struggles at the start of his career with holdings and penalties and all that.
Well, the thing about that is Garrett Bowles was very publicly like derided and criticized after the love affair that Snow College fans had and then Utah fans had. Garrett Bowles went to the NFL and there were growing pains, and there was not a lot of patience because of his draft position. There was not a lot of patience because of how much money had been committed to him. And it was, I think, a study in, and now it's certainly working out the way that probably he wanted it to and everyone else wanted it to. But I think it's a study in what happens with a little bit of patience in sports, especially in pro sports now. The New England Patriots fired Gerard Mayo after a season, right? You can find a bunch of dudes on rosters. You can find a bunch of coaches on staffs who don't get any time to develop, who don't get any time to learn the craft, who don't get any time to get healthy, don't get any time in this insane environment of what have you done for me lately. And by the way, this is trickling down to college sports and is trickling down to high school sports and is trickling down like economics does, where it is more rare to have the Garrett Bowles story where it's just like, hey, like this guy, we gave him a little bit of time. We let him develop. He made the changes he needed to make. He put in the work he needed to put in. And he went from being like a potential draft bust or a person that a lot of people were just like, oh, this was a waste of a pick. He went from being that to one of the highest graded guys at his position, the highest compensated guys at his position in the NFL. And it's a credit to him ultimately, but it's also, and I hate doing this because I'm not a Broncos fan, it's also a credit to a franchise and to the idea that patience can be rewarded in sports where the environment in sports is often so fraught and so, hey, do it now, give it to me now. I want the best stuff now. The Broncos were not in a position when Garrett Bowles was a rookie, second-year, third-year player to be saying like, hey, we're a one better tackle away from another Super Bowl. The rest of the roster needed its improvements as well. It wasn't a Garrett Bowles problem. Garrett Bowles solved his problems, and now he's on his way to the playoffs. Congratulations to all you Broncos fans out there. Send me a card when you make it past the first round. All right, taking a break here. We're going to come back, talk a little college football with Josh Newman. He's got some insight on what brought the former Utah quarterback, the former Vanderbilt quarterback, the speedster Nate Johnson back into the fold at the University of Utah. We'll get to that and some college football playoff discussion on the Sean O'Connell Show. This is ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM, proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.
On offense, Bentley the tight end in the right slot. Two tights, two wides. Second down handoff. No, Nate Johnson's going to keep it himself. Nate up the sideline. There he goes. 40, 35-30, 25-20. Bye-bye. 10-5 touchdown. There's that speed.
That was a 59-yard touchdown run by Nate Johnson in a win back in November 2023 over Arizona State University. Different times, people, different times. That's courtesy of the Utah Sports Radio Network. Bill Riley on the call. We welcome Josh Newman. Look, a former Utah insider, now on the Texas beat, college football guru, if we want to call him that. Josh Newman, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, OC. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we always love talking to you. Before we get to anything about this Texas-Ohio State matchup, I do want to you've got insight. You've got connections in the Nate Johnson world, and he's back at the University of Utah after an experiment with Vanderbilt as a quarterback down there. Like, we all were enamored with his skills. We all were enamored with his traits as a player, and now it looks like he might be a good fit for a system that has leaned, at least when Jason Beck was at New Mexico, leaned on a quarterback's running ability. How did this reconciliation or this reconnection happen? Do you know?
Oh, I mean, I don't know specifics there. I mean, I'm sure there was a pretty, lengthy conversation between, Nate Johnson, his father Jerome, potentially Nate's quarterback guy back in Fresno, and Kyle Whittingham and Morgan Scalley. It's just, when this came across my timeline last week, I just found it fascinating because you generally don't see a kid who left, goes to a different program, then returns to program number one where he started his career. Again, I'm sure there had to be some real kind of come to Jesus moments, so to speak, for Nate. The interesting thing is, like, I remember taking a ride up to Clovis one day after Pac-12 Media Day in 2021 to, talk to him. He had committed already, was curious to see him practice and hear his story. And he spoke with such conviction at the time. He wasn't even a high school senior yet. He spoke with such conviction that he was a quarterback and nobody was going to talk him out of that. So I am, obviously he's kind of gone through his career here. It has not panned out the way he had hoped in terms of being a major college quarterback. So, again, as someone who got to know that story and covered the program, now I'm away. I'm kind of on the outside looking in. I'm very fascinated to see how that whole thing plays out now moving forward.
Well, I mean, we've seen it even in recent history where guys who wore a quarterback's shirt have been asked to fill different roles at the University of Utah, guys with certain athletic traits like size, like speed. So I wonder, you talk about that conviction. All of us, when we're high schoolers and young college players, we have this conviction about certain things, and if anything can erode that confidence or can erode that conviction, it's the reality of hey, dude, well, if you're a quarterback, you're a backup quarterback. You're a quarterback who doesn't play. So I will also be very curious to see if there's a different way or a better way for him to get on the field, or if this is a depth play.
Again, he was not a quarterback for his entire life, or at least not his entire high school career, right? When he was a sophomore at Clovis, they had a pretty entrenched veteran starter when Nate was a sophomore there, and they needed a wide receiver. Okay, so he got on board and he had 1,000+ all-purpose yards as a sophomore, and then as a junior he was a quarterback, but COVID hits, and he had sort of this truncated 7-game season, didn't have all the film. It's going to be interesting. I mean, I think the one thing that everybody can agree on is, the speed and the athleticism and the tools. Even when he was playing very sparingly at Utah, right? He was a situational guy. Wildcat would come in here, would come in there, threw a couple of touchdown passes. You could see the athleticism, and you could see the tools, and you could see that he was, a little faster, a little more physically able than most of the other players on the field. I always sort of thought that it wasn't an indictment on Kyle or Andy Ludwig that they couldn't find a role for him or get him on the field in some sort of expanded capacity. But it always felt to me like, come on, like, get this kid on the field. Like, he clearly has the tools. Look, you had Rising in front of you. You're not the starting quarterback. He's not the starting quarterback. But you need to find some sort of role for this kid because he is just that type of gifted athlete. Again, we'll see what this kind of this new regime on the offensive side of the ball at least has to do with Nate Johnson.
Speaking of guys who they have a skill set and you just got to find a way to put them on the field, and Texas did that even with Quinn Ewers as their starter. Texas did that with Arch Manning, and somehow maybe the most impressive thing about this season for Steve Sarkisian has been the way that and you experience it a lot more in depth than I do, but the way that the folks that have been clamoring to see Arch Manning as a Texas starting quarterback have been, I think, sort of appeased by the play of Quinn Ewers, by the success of the team, and by the fact that they do get to see Arch every now and then. But we're looking at all these reports coming out about Texas and its quarterback situation. And this is a team still active, getting ready for a college football playoff semifinal. And it's like, hey, other teams offering Quinn Ewers $6 million to transfer to their school. And, he's got NFL opportunities. And the wild thing for me is that it's just like, well, we know that he's got a bright future in football, but it does not seem to be like one of those options is to come back with more eligibility and play at Texas. Is that really how it is?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. If Quinn Ewers wants to play more college football, which I don't think it's happening, and as you said, I saw the $6 million offer, $8 million offer. Well, of course, okay, like a major college football program that needs a veteran quarterback who has started. I think he's going to start game 36 for his career Friday in the Cotton Bowl. It's like, yeah, of course you're going to pony up like crazy huge money, but a couple of things. Like it doesn't seem to me that he wants to play college football anymore. 99.9% chance that these are the final days for Quinn Ewers as a collegian. The season will end however it ends. He's going to go to the NFL draft. But if he decides that he does want to play more college football, it's not going to be at Texas. Okay, Arch Manning is going to open 2025. With the keys to the engine. With the keys to the car. He's waited very patiently. You don't see kids of that caliber waiting 1, let alone 2 years to get on the field, but everybody has shown a tremendous amount of patience. So if yours wants to keep playing college football, I'm very certain in saying that it's not going to be at Texas.
So I would understand. I mean, I understand it because I understand the environment of what college football is and because Arch Manning is something unique sitting behind him. But, like, the idea that a guy could have quarterbacked his team successfully to national championship contention, and yet the fan base and the coaching staff, at least to some extent, are still like, yeah, but we want to see what's next, though. Like, good job. That is, it's such a foreign and wild mindset for folks who, I mean, look, I've been observing a Utah football team now closest for years and years where it's like, if you could have a Quinn Ewers, people would build a statue to the damn kid.
Oh, my God. Forget it. If Quinn Ewers showed up at Utah and has had the career that he's had at Utah, they would build a statue next to wherever Kyle Whittingham's statue is going to go. But this kid plays for Texas. And not only does he play for Texas, he was one of the highest rated recruits ever. He's from the Dallas area, right? He's playing for the flagship school. And yes, he's had these moments this year where he's been tremendous. Like the end of that Peach Bowl against Arizona State, throws a touchdown on 4th and 13 in the first overtime to tie it, throws the game-winning touchdown in the second overtime. But for like long stretches of that game, he was bad. Like he played poorly, and the decision-making was not great. And that's kind of been part of the story this year. It's like they're almost winning in spite of how he's played. Like he's had some really like, whoa, what are you doing, dude, type of moments. But the defense is just so prolific. They're giving up like nothing through the air generally. The defensive line has been better than anybody could have imagined this year. So it seems crazy to say that like they're winning in spite of yours if you just look at his raw numbers, but they are sort of winning in spite of yours. And, anybody who's like clamoring for Arch Manning, I get it. He's probably a better quarterback. He's got a better skill set, can do it with his legs. I get all that. The intangible stuff and the late game stuff and the fact that he started 35 games, Like, that's why Steve Sarkisian has continued to go with Quinn Ewers in spite of what a lot of people around here want.
All right, so I'm looking right now at the Quinn Ewers NFL scouting report, which of course will change pretty significantly, potentially, once you get into that actual evaluation process, because that's just how things go. That's what they do. What would be like the draft position that he would look back on and say, "Oh, I should have gone and taken that $6, $7, $8 million and stayed in college football"? Because if
That's
he's
a great question.
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, I don't think he's a first round pick. I mean, you could find a scout that would say, yeah, if he does well at the combine, he's done enough throughout his career, older guy, like maybe he slips into the bottom of the first round. And then there's other scouts saying, mid day 2, late day 2. You're talking about round 3, round 4. I don't think he falls out of day 2, but you talk about an $8 million NIL offer. Like, you have to remember, like, what is his appetite to be in school and to be dealing with coursework and to be going to college? These are, I understand the NIL and the money. These are still like student athletes, and they have to deal with class, and they have to deal with all the stuff that student athletes have to deal with. He just doesn't have the appetite to be doing that anymore. And frankly, it's it's not projected to be a strong quarterback draft class. So if you're him, and your stock is up and down, and who knows where it might end up. If you're Quinn Ewers, you have to go now when the draft class is not projected to be very strong. It's very hard for me to wrap my head around him playing any more college football. It just doesn't make any sense, frankly.
All right, let's talk about the matchup itself, because we won't be able to get you back on before the game actually happens. Friday, it is 2 college football blue bloods, 2 absolute heavyweights squaring off in a semifinal, which I'm sure is exactly what the networks wanted, and I don't think that most of the college football fans around the world are bothered by this being a matchup. Who has the advantage? Because there's a lot of folks who think that Ohio State, despite where they came into this playoff, might be the best team, most talented team in the field.
Yeah, I caught like a little bit of the first half of the Rose Bowl after Texas Arizona State kind of wrapped up, and I was just stunned at how thoroughly Ohio State manhandled like a very good, unbeaten, like power conference champion Oregon team. And Will Howard is not an exceptional quarterback, but he's got all the pieces on the outside, in the slot, tight end. You've got a veteran running back in Tavion Henderson. I don't think. Look, we're all sort of prisoners of the moment, right? We saw what Ohio State did to Oregon. We saw Texas try to give away the Peach Bowl against Arizona State. So I think initially the thought was, Ohio State's going to just blow them out. They're going to blow them off the field, and that's going to be it. I don't think Texas wins this game, but I think they represent themselves well, mostly because, again, the defense really has been very, very stingy all year. They're certainly going to give up some stuff, okay, because Ohio State's got all the big play capability. But it's going to be a game. It strikes me as something, I don't know, 34-24, something comfortable for Ohio State, but I don't think that Texas will get blown off the field like Oregon did.
Let's say Texas moves on to a national championship game. Who do you think emerges from the other semifinal?
Notre Dame is playing at a pretty exceptional level on both sides of the ball, specifically on defense. They're very stingy defensively. I don't know that Penn State is ready for the grinder of a game that Notre Dame wants to make that one, while Ohio State, Texas is going to have points, Notre Dame, Penn State, at least to me, that feels like 17-14, 16-13, whoever has the ball last, right? So, maybe you're trying to milk the clock away on like an 8-minute drive to end the game. But, Notre Dame, since losing to Northern Illinois, has just sort of like stayed the course, and it's just, physical win after physical win. They're leaning on teams down the stretch, and that's what they did against Georgia. So that would be, it's been an interesting college football season, right? So much talk about the SEC and Southern football, but like Northern football is sort of running the show, at least for this college football playoff. You've got Ohio State still playing, and you've got this, kind of quintessential Northeast, Northern sort of semifinal with Notre Dame and Penn State. Think for people of a certain age who grew up watching Notre Dame when they were really Notre Dame, and Penn State with Paterno and all those teams. I think people of a certain age are very much looking forward to that semifinal.
Since you brought up the whole SEC thing, like, How is there a single SEC conference sticker on a bumper in Austin, Texas?
No, it's awkward. I'll be honest with you, it's awkward. They were in the Big 12 for so long, right? They were in the Big 12 for 27 years, and they were founding members of the Southwest Conference before that, and they were in that for 70 years. And just the awkwardness of realignment and what college athletics is, right? Texas is outside the traditional SEC footprint, and even just being around campus, like you see the SEC signage and the burnt orange, and it's on uniforms, and it's on the basketball arena and the football stadium. It feels very unnatural to even say that Texas is in the SEC. It's weird. It's not what I grew up with. It's not what you grew up with. People older than us, even guys, look, there's guys who have been covering Texas since before I was born, right? Going back to the early 70s. And they're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, I grew up and it was Southwest Conference football, and the SWC winner was going to the Cotton Bowl every year. And it's a very weird time for college athletics for a lot of reasons. And Texas, as you alluded to, is really at the forefront of that, given their new conference affiliation. Yeah,
it's funny because the SEC still gets to plant that flag and say, "Oh, we made the playoff," but not really. It's Texas. It was Texas that carried the flag for you, and no one thinks of them as an SEC school. And I just wanted to make sure that Texas doesn't yet fully think of itself as an SEC school.
No, the thing about SEC schools is and I'm talking traditional SEC schools, right? Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State. They've got this moxie about them that they're in the SEC, and it just means more, right? That's the saying. It just means more. But Texas sort of feels not on the outside looking in, but they don't really have interest in being part of that particular party. They want to win everything, and they don't really care about unity, SEC this, SEC that. It's been an interesting dynamic, sort of watching Texas enter the SEC. Right, they had a great season in football, obviously. Right, soccer team won the SEC tournament. Volleyball team, went deep into the NCAA tournament, but it just doesn't. It doesn't feel like that SEC unity when you're watching Texas compete in really anything. It's been quite interesting.
Before I let you go, wellness check on you as a Jets fan. What do you want? You want Rex Ryan back?
No, that might cause me to. I might be out. I might be out. Black Monday in the NFL, you start seeing teams asking permission to interview, coordinators for head coaching jobs, and the names that are sort of trickling out for the Jets. It's well, they're probably not getting Mike Vrabel. That would be my number one pick, and then the rest of is I don't know, man. This feels pretty underwhelming, just like the Jets were this year. So I guess that makes sense.
Well, hang in there. It's at least Giants fans don't have it much better. That's got to be some consolation, right?
It's funny. They do seem to be just a little more dysfunctional than the Jets are, which was never the case when I was growing up. So that's definitely been fun, for sure.
All right. Thanks for your time. As always, enjoy the game this week.
I appreciate it, OC. Thanks.
Josh Newman, great work covering college football now down there on the Texas beat, and I appreciated him with a little insight on Nate Johnson's return to the University of Utah. The way that these things happen, I could get on board with a miniature 30 for 30 on every single major personnel decision. If there was a school, and Colorado would be the only one to be willing to do this, that would give you kind of all access to their recruiting conversations and to their GM and how those decisions are made, like a little Hard Knocks kind of a situation. Content is king. That would be good. Although no one would ever open up the coffers, and certainly wouldn't happen at the University of Utah. The ESPN 792.1 FM cash kickoff is here. We're giving you a shot to win $1,000 cash to pay your bills. Text DOUGH, D-O-U-G-H, to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win. 508-777-1000. A nationwide contest. The ESPN 792.1 FM cash kickoff. $1,000. Text DOUGH, D-O-U-G-H, to 508-777-1000. All right, we alluded to this earlier. 1 year 1 year you get in some NFL franchises to prove that you are the right head coach, even if you're a former player for that franchise. That's what happened in New England. We'll talk about it next on the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700. O'Connell Show. Talk about the closing of the NFL regular season, everything going on with Utah football and this transfer portal, college football playoffs Scott's been on some holiday vacation. Haven't checked in with him in a while. Looking forward to that conversation. Wanted to remind everybody that no matter what job you are in, the masses, the mob, the crowd can come and they could take it away from you. All right? Gerard Mayo, the one-year head coach of the New England Patriots, has been fired. They are moving on. A guy who was a valued member of the franchise as a player was named as the successor of Bill Belichick, and it's always hard to be the guy to follow the guy. Maybe he'll end up on Belichick's staff down at North Carolina. We'll see what happens. But the reason, if you read all of the publication about this, and there's plenty of examinations happening, Robert Kraft, in his statement, all of the articles around this thing, this is a fan reaction situation for Mayo. He lost the mob. It's like Gladiator, not Gladiator 2, haven't seen yet, the original one, right? Win the mob, win your freedom. That's the message delivered to Maximus Decimus Meridius. He lost the mob. And Robert Kraft, as an owner, feels like he is more in touch with his fan base and that he has a better relationship with his fan base. That may or may not be true. And Mayo and his players, the extension of head coaches is the players, Jelani Tavai and some other people started saying things that the fan base didn't like. Mayo's messaging was too inconsistent and kind of scattered, and the fans didn't like it. And so he got a 1 year sample. He got a 1 year leash from Robert Kraft, and now they're moving on. And this is not just some yahoo who got hired out of a coaching tree somewhere. This is a guy who wore the uniform.
Yeah.
So it's something that, look, obviously in my job, you're trying to appeal to the masses, unsuccessfully at the moment. You're trying to appeal to the masses, and it makes perfect sense that you have to be really, really careful about how you do and say things as a sports media personality. Bill Belichick was never careful about how he addressed the media there. He was never careful, it didn't seem like, about how he addressed fan perception. And he won enough that didn't matter. Mayo was given no time. This is going to be another one of those situations where he's going to end up on a staff somewhere. He's going to have success. He's going to be given another opportunity. We're going to call him an NFL retread, and we're not really going to know if this thing that happened in New England was relevant one way or another to his abilities as a head coach. Because when you're not winning, you won't find a more hostile fan base than the one up there in New England. These are Boston people, all right? All they want is to win. They've been spoiled by every single one of their franchises. There's not a 10-year-old kid in Boston alive who hasn't seen the local teams, two of the local teams, win championships. You know how insane that is? These people are spoiled right now. And Robert Kraft, and he gets to do things his own way, and I'm not going to question him because he's had a lot of success. But this is a reaction by the owner to fan perception. Head coaches in the NFL are not typically at the whims of a fan base. It does not seem.
Yeah, and I just saw the tweet from Shefty that Robert Kraft said that was the hardest decision I had to make.
Okay, well,
like
a feather in Gerard Mayo's cap,
yeah.
I guess, did not ascend as I had hoped. He did not. The team did not ascend as you had hoped. He's a first-year head coach with a roster that doesn't have a whole lot to it. And what is that Patriots franchise lacking? Most importantly, no franchise quarterback. So, good luck to Mayo and whoever takes over. That is a rough situation in New England. All right, taking a quick one here. Scott Mitchell is going to join us next. We'll talk a lot of football, but one fascinating thing you saw in the final week of NFL football was players chasing bonuses. Individual performance bonuses written into their contracts. We'll see if Scott Mitchell and his decorated career ever had to do that, ever had to play a few extra downs to try and hit that yardage total that might trigger a bonus. Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Hour 2 of the Sean O'Connell Show beginning here on a Monday. NFL playoff picture is set. Regular season in the books. We'll talk a little bit of that with Scott Mitchell, our guest, Utah football legend, longtime NFL veteran as well. Scott, welcome back. How was the holiday and the vacation?
Eventful. A lot going on. You know, I got older. I got fatter. And I had a great holiday, so it was good.
It's happening to all of us, Scott, especially around the holidays, the older and fatter thing. I'll get into some matchups and all that fun stuff. We'll talk some college football playoff and what's going on with the Utes in these last few weeks since we've had a chance to check in. But I want to ask you, because it's fresh on my mind, and we're going to go over it again a little later on the show. The bonus thing that happens in the final week of the regular season, where guys in the NFL games have they got to hit a certain sack number, they got to hit a certain yardage total, passing yards, receiving yards, whatever it is, and there's bonuses written into their contracts based on whether or not they achieve these milestones. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch the teammates' reaction to it. How much a part of the contracts that you signed and of the general contract structure of the NFL when you were playing were these performance bonuses?
I actually think they were more when I played, and a lot of it had to do with the salary cap and the implications of getting a bonus and how it impacted things. I did have bonuses. In fact, I had a bonus that I hit, and I wasn't even playing. And they were not happy about that. It was when I was in Baltimore, and I had all these. I took my salary and I put it into a bonus. So I took less money, and then they had this bonus, and they gave me all these like almost bogus if I hit any one of these just really simple kind of easy bonuses, then I got the bonus, and I ended up only playing like 3 games for the Ravens that year, and we had to win like X number of games. So we're playing the New England Patriots. It was Y2K. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah.
And,
oh yeah.
So we're playing after Y2K, and everyone thought the world was going to end, and we end up beating the Patriots. And thank you, Tony Banks, who was the starter at the time, and so I got the bonus. Because we got a win total, and I didn't even play. So yeah, it was a good day. They were not happy about it, but oh well, too bad for them. I think with the bonus thing though, it's a lot of it is if you're on a good team, right? So if you're on a bad team, they'll take you out. They'll not throw the ball to you. They'll do all kinds of things like, no, we're not. Look, if we all suck, nobody's getting bonuses this year. It's going to be, a Grinch Christmas for all of us, and that's the thing. It seems to be a little bit less that way, but I know literally there were calls down from the GM during the game. Don't throw the ball to that guy. Take that guy out of the game, kind of thing. And it was a little bit different than back in the day, but yeah. And the bonuses today are crazy, Sean. I mean, it's like millions and millions of dollars. Guy might get $100,000 or the most $1 million, but guys getting, I don't know, I believe a quarterback, Geno Smith got like, I don't know, $8 million or $6 million, something like that.
Geno Smith hit a $6 million bonus yesterday. He had to play a good game, so congrats to him. But with his team eliminated from the playoffs and Geno Smith, obviously the franchise was like, let him try and get it, let him try and, because $6 million is not insignificant, and he had to get to 10 wins, which they did. He had to go over 4,282 yards, which is a strange number, but that's the one that was in the contract. He got over that, and I think he went 23 of 26 or 23 of 27, something like that on the day, and that brought his completion percentage over 69.75%, which is, I mean, that's a high completion percentage. So those are really good numbers. He hit all of them in the final game of the season. Bam, $6 million.
Yeah, and for a guy like Geno Smith, they probably want to have him as their interim guy, maybe, because he's really proven himself to be a legitimate starter and has done well. And to win, 10 games and to have those kind of numbers like that, that's a guy that deserves it. But on top of it, you want to keep a guy like that happy. You want to keep him around. You want to keep him incentivized and being able to do that and letting him get it is a good thing, because I'm telling you, a lot of teams that are out of the playoffs, they might not be as generous. So it's kind of a smart move for your future to make your players happy, and I can see the value in that or the logic behind it as well.
Scott Mitchell, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Right now we're talking NFL football. We'll get to some Utes and some college football here in just a moment. The playoff picture has taken shape. The playoff picture is set. The Detroit Lions, for the first time ever, Scott Mitchell, are the number 1 seed in the NFC. As a man who played for the franchise, spent a lot of years there, what's it like for you to watch what Dan Campbell and company have done with that Detroit franchise?
Well, I think it really starts with Dan Campbell, and he went in there and kind of mirrored the culture of the community, and it's a tough-nosed, blue-collar, and he got the people and he got the fans behind himself and the team, and it's really important because those fans are great fans, but they're brutal fans, and to get them on your side enough to where they actually cheer for Jared Goff, which, you have to understand something. Detroit Lions fans, their favorite pastime is to boo the starting quarterback and to boo the goalie for the Red Wings. Like it's not that they're mad, it's just kind of what they do. And for them to actually cheer and chant for Jared Goff, who's been phenomenal for the team, it says a lot. But it's that kind of half a butt cheek and all these different things and snot nosed and just hard. Like, people relate to that and going for it on fourth down, a million. It's like, we play to win. We just, we take no prisoner kind of mindset really, really bought the community into him on top of the players. And they did a good job. Who would have said, okay, we're going to take Jared Goff and replace Matt Stafford, and we're going to do well. Now, I don't think there were many people that thought that. And so they were pretty savvy about the players they got, but the thing I think is most impressive is how many players they've had injured. Like, they had a ton of guys injured, and they've created a culture of winning, and they've created a standard that these players hold themselves to. It's a lot like the Kansas City Chiefs, where I don't know how talented or how good that team really is, but they just created and understand the culture of winning in the NFL and what it really takes, because the reality is the talent level on each of these teams isn't that great. These bad teams are not. I mean, still got pretty talented players on their team, but it's that mindset and that culture and those little things that just kind of separate and set you apart. And Dan Campbell has done a brilliant job of creating that culture in Detroit.
So they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. The Kansas City Chiefs are looking to make history by going back to back to back. No one's ever done that. Super Bowl victories 3 years in a row. Same regular season record as the Lions, and they clinched the number 1 seed in the AFC, so they've got the home field advantage and all that stuff. And like you're saying, there are some parallels between these rosters. The Lions roster, I think, is a younger version of what you've seen for the most part in Kansas City, but this is a team that just finds ways to win, has one of the best coaching staffs in the country, obviously has the trump card that is Patrick Mahomes, although he did not have, he wasn't the best quarterback in the regular season in the NFL this year. Do you believe in the Kansas City Chiefs' ability to go back to back to back?
Absolutely, and you do, because you mentioned staffs, right? And there's so many good coaches, great coaches on these staffs, and it just takes a lot of pressure off of the head coach. Ben Olsen and Aaron Glenn have done a tremendous job in Detroit, and Spagnuolo, who's they won last year, and they've been winning this year on their defense. And it's not necessarily Patrick Mahomes, but it's literally kind of like the U, where, hey, let's just keep it at the end of the game, I don't know that there's anyone in the NFL you wouldn't want in that situation more than Patrick Mahomes. And again, it goes back to that. They understand how to win. They understand what it takes to win games, and they understand kind of how to pace yourself through a season, because seasons are long, and they're even longer now. They got 18-game schedule or 17-game schedule. The Super Bowl isn't until into February. They start in July, and pacing yourself and knowing, kind of when to exert that energy and when not to is a real veteran team type of thing. And with the Lions kind of figuring that out the last couple of years, what it takes to pace yourself and to pace yourself to be home. Sleeping in your own bed, having the familiarity, having some time off, having the juice of the home crowd. Lions fans, Kansas City Chiefs fans are amazing. Like, they're so good, and it's such a weapon to help you kind of push through in the playoffs, especially. I think it's a huge advantage for both of these teams, but they really understand how to win and maybe not be the best teams in the league doing it.
Scott Mitchell for a few more minutes here on the Sean O'Connell Show, part of our Big 12 at noon coverage, brought to you by Mountain Land Supply. Visit mountainlandsupply.com or any of their in-person brick-and-mortar locations, including a brand-new one that just opened up a couple months ago, mountainlandsupply.com. All right, let's talk a little Utah football as the college football playoff continues. We're down to the semifinal games. I mean, that was the standard that Utah was chasing this year and obviously fell well short of it. And now the question is, can you salvage with the current coaching staff in place, with the confusion and lack of communication as the season came to a close about Kyle Whittingham's plans and then the clarification afterward, can this team, salvage those same kind of hopes that we came into 2024 with, where everyone thought this is a Big 12 championship caliber roster, this is a Big 12 championship caliber team. That, of course, means a playoff caliber team. And that feels, Scott, so long ago. Can Utah get back to that in one off-season cycle?
Absolutely, and it's just NIL. It's a transfer portal. This was a program that built internally. They took 3 stars, they turned them into 4 stars. They did such a great job of developing players, and I'm not sure you can do that anymore in college football, because the guys that you've been trying to develop are leaving. They're all your backups are in the transfer portal, and you lost a couple of starting guys, Calhoun and Tanavasa, and those are good players. And so now you got to go out in the transfer portal, and you've seen Utah be very active in the transfer portal. Active to some degree on defense, but really active on the offensive side of the ball. And so you're kind of trading, guys. You're trading some backups to get some new starting players. You've seen a lot of schools that have 1 year, man, they're down and out and in the dumps, and they get into the portal heavy, which is what Utah's done this year. I don't know that they've done that in the past. I think they've changed their mindset about how we need to build our roster. And so, the downside to that is you got guys that are new into your program, so it's harder with your schemes. You got to kind of vanilla it up a little bit and just let guys go play. And I think that's kind of what they've done. I think with Jason Buck or Beck and with his style of play and the quarterback that he brought with him, it gives Utah a chance to be competitive and more explosive offensively. But you got to be able to not make your systems easy so guys can come in and play like right from day one. And you look around the country, everybody's doing this, and it's a huge shift, right? Because the Alabamas, the Georgias, the teams that you thought, okay, they're the perennial teams here, they've lost their backups too. And those backups who are great players are going on to play. They're going, hey, I want to play. I want to make some money. I'm not going to sit around and wait anymore. I can go make some money. I can go to the NFL anyway. Utah got a guy from Oregon like that, a highly recruited player, and he was a backup. And so it's kind of spreading the talent and the kind of the strength of power in college football is more evened out, and so it's kind of anyone's game. A lot of people are like, change the playoffs, and and don't let these teams rest, and like all these things are so stupid. Because I think the answer is simple as far as the playoff structure, because I like the playoff structure. The problem with it, and there's only one problem in my mind, Sean, the problem is this. The conferences are too big. So you get an Indiana who probably doesn't play anyone in their conference. They don't have to play everyone, and they may skate through with a really good record, but they weren't really that good a team. And so they kind of get in, and you go, well, maybe there's better teams here. But it's because of the conference, and they're every year Utah's not going to play like 4 teams in their conference, and if you get the good draw, you may have a better record, but maybe you're not the better team because you're playing the poorer teams in the conference. And on top of it, you look at the Big 12 and who they thought was going to do well and didn't, and who they thought was going to be poor was good. Arizona State, I think, is a really great example of a team that went in the portal, that found some really key players, and it turned everything around for them. So yeah, in a year, boy, there's no question you can change things around and get in the playoffs. And I mean, Arizona State had a bye, and so
they did.
Yeah, anyone can do it. Anyone, Sean.
Devin Dampier, the quarterback coming from New Mexico, very dynamic player. His stats were like, not a great completion percentage, 12 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. If they call you and say, hey, Scott, you got to mentor this guy, we got to – what's the number you want to improve most significantly? What's the number you want to focus on as you're mentoring this guy? Eliminating interceptions, because he did throw 12, just increasing his productivity in the touchdown category. You can throw 12 interceptions as long as you have 30 touchdowns. Or are you trying to get that completion percentage up?
Well, it's clearly throwing the ball more accurately. I mean, that's the simple solution. But what I really like about Devin Dampier is, one, he projects himself outward. I watched interviews of him, and there's a personality there. There's a guy that isn't holding everything in, and so he plays freer. He plays looser. And then the other thing I liked about him is he got better as the season went along. A lot of times these kids where, he really is a runner first. And I mean, I've watched film on him from back when he was younger, and he's just an older version of what he was younger. And it was really a run first thing. And in a lot of ways, it's very helpful because, he's so productive in the red zone, and having a quarterback that can run the football in the red zone is a real bonus. But there are just times when you're going to have to throw the football, and you're going to have to throw it accurately. You're going to have to throw it like in a pressure situation, and he has that threat to a defense already. A guy that can run creates a massive problem for a defense, and if he can match that up with being able to throw the ball a little bit more consistently and accurately, he can be a very, very, very dynamic player this year and moving forward. I mean, so and there's going to be some weapons to throw to. You're going to have a good offensive line. You're going to have a good running back. The cupboard is far from bare with this offense. But if he can throw the ball just a little bit more consistently and accurately, he could be a really dynamic player for Utah this year, a big-time player.
Some of the moves in the transfer portal, some of the departures especially, it feels like, Utah's been mostly lucky. Luck is probably the wrong word. They've been fortunate in that outgoing players in the transfer portal, for the most part, have not been massive impact players and have not been guys that, for lack of better terminology, that the team misses all that much. I mean, Jaquindon Jackson this past season was obviously a big loss. Some of the Calhoun people took that one pretty personally. Keanu Tanavasa even more so. I think we just have to get used to it because you can't always be on the positive side of the ledger when it comes to this transfer portal, and especially after a bad year, these are natural things that are going to happen. But as a guy who played through the whole business phase of football in his life as a professional, as someone who spent a lot of years in the NFL. How do you not take it personally as a fan base who puts like a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort and support of all these players, and then these guys who are professing loyalty and all bought in on the culture, then the next day are gone?
It's a hard thing no matter what, because we're human, right? And when we are in a sport where we spend so much time with each other, like the hours and not only the time you're spending together, but the exertion, the mental exertion to prepare yourself and to study, and the physical exertion to get yourself ready to play and to recover. You just beat the heck after games. And so going through that grind, and it's a grind, and it's a long season, and you're so intimately connected, a lot of meeting time. And so you're just have this closeness, and it's hard as humans not to create bonds and create relationships. But it's also challenging because they're not like, there's not necessarily that loyalty there. And that's been a big part of the culture of Utah, that they've created this family, this culture. I mean, now you got to have meet and greets all the time with your players because nobody knows each other. We got to have a Sunday social, where we make Sundays and we greet and meet and introduce ourselves to each other on a regular basis. And it's a real thing, being able to create culture with change and knowing change is probably going to happen every single year. Figuring that out, and I think whoever can figure it out is someone is going to have a leg up on people. Figuring out how to get chemistry with new bodies and get people to buy into a culture, and that's a tough thing. And so Keanu Tuivasa was a really good leader in that locker room, and that's a player that you miss. And so when I was mentioning an outward kind of projecting person like Devin Dampier, that personality needs to kind of pull guys together, and really you're kind of pulling each other together for the moment. It's not a down the road thing. It's like, okay, we just gotta focus on this year, this game, this week, and not get too caught up in what's going to happen in the future. Because it was killing me listening to Keanu Tuivasa talk about being at BYU, and especially with he was so passionately connected to Utah, and that certainly stings, and it's hard for anyone, and myself included, to kind of hear that as a Utah guy.
Well, we're all going to have to get used to it. It's going to get worse before it gets better, it seems like, with all the changes in college football, and we'll be on top of it with Scott Mitchell helping us out the whole way. Welcome back. Glad to have you back on, and appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yeah, always. Thank you, Sean.
That's Scott Mitchell, Utah football legend, and, of course, longtime NFL veteran as well. His former franchise, I think it's safe to say that that's the franchise that Scott is most associated with, the Detroit Lions. First time ever in their long and storied history, first time ever that they are the number one overall seed in the NFC. Home field advantage in the playoffs. 15-2 regular season record. Wow. All right. We'll shift gears. We'll talk a little basketball. The Jazz are not tanking correctly. And it's not for lack of trying. We'll talk about it on the Sean O'Connell Show in 3 minutes. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
That was the first of 7 to serve. And Sensabaugh is out of his mind.
Come on.
Look at Sexton.
Bryce Sensabaugh with a three-pointer late in the Jazz victory. 136-100 over the Heat. That was on Saturday. A career high 34 points for Sensabaugh. The Jazz winning 2 in a row. They now have the 5th best lottery odds in the NBA. Now, there's a lot of basketball left to play, but that highlight courtesy of SEG Media. Craig Bolerjack, Thurl Bailey on the call. And you could hear the disbelief in Big T's voice. He's like, come on, man, what's going on? Yeah, exactly. What is going on? This team is supposed to be tanking, and I know it's hard to root for your favorite team to lose. I think the fan base for this Utah Jazz squad has gotten on board with that idea. The other thing about it is you are not a dysfunctional franchise in Utah right now. We talked about this with Sarah Todd when she joined us and showed the fact that Will Hardy has somehow found a way to strike this balance with players who would have every right in a tanking situation, especially veteran guys, to just be grumpy, to be bothered by the scenario. These guys are mostly happy. They mostly get along. They kind of all understand the assignment, except Bryce Sensabaugh apparently doesn't understand the assignment because he's going off for 34 points. The fact that the Jazz are not a dysfunctional franchise means that when you go on the road and you face a dysfunctional franchise, you've got a chance to win. The Miami Heat right now, with the whole Jimmy Butler saga painfully slow in the way that it's unfolding, they're dysfunctional at this moment. And even an injury-ridden, excessively rested, tanking on purpose franchise that is functional can beat a dysfunctional franchise, can beat a team that has a sour taste in the locker room right now. That's franchise player, that the face of the squad who not so long ago overcame all these odds and just dragged by his own grit and the sweat of his brow a franchise to the very brink of a championship with very little help. That guy's now unhappy, and it just makes it poisons the entire well. So the Jazz winning 2 in a row have now positioned them, unfortunately, lower in the upcoming draft, but with plenty of basketball left to play as we're at, roughly the halfway point of the season. This was, by the way, with 4 of your top 5 point scorers absent from the roster. You were sitting everybody. Soreness and injuries and precautions and whatever else. 4 of your top 5 scorers for the Utah Jazz not playing in that game. And the unfortunate reality is because, again, you are not dysfunctional. You are a well-coached franchise. You are a team that is working out and practicing the right way. Your young guys, when they get this opportunity, they bite down on it. And when they're seeing something across the floor from them that is hangdog and bad body language and low effort, they take advantage of it and they get you wins. So this is one of those. It's like having an over-enthusiastic giant puppy, you know? Like, this is the St. Bernard Great Dane puppy in your life where, gosh, I love you, but could you just calm down a little bit? Could you just relax just a little bit? I don't want you. I have this big, beautiful vase full of flowers that's teetering on the edge of the coffee table, and all I need for you is to just chill out so that thing doesn't get knocked off. And in this case, the vase of flowers is a high lottery pick. And Bryce Sensabaugh, today, you, my friend, are the awkward Great Dane puppy that just went a little bit too crazy, got a little bit over-enthusiastic, tail was wagging a little bit too hard, and you got that thing tipping off the edge. I don't know. I'm boring people because I keep hammering this. I truly do not envy the position of veteran players and especially the coaching staff trying to find the right balance between, I know that the Heat right now are an absolute mess and their effort is going to be inferior to yours and their commitment is going to be inferior to yours. But I want you to go out there and give it the old college try. don't put up 134 points on them. You can't say it. You can't even think it. You can't even feel it. But somehow you have to make the results manifest something other than best effort. I've never covered a team. I've never been around a team. I've never watched a team closely that is supposed to be aggressively tanking. And it is one of the most uncomfortable things as a sports fan I think that you can actually experience. Because everything else that you've learned, that you've hoped for, that you've experienced, everything else is on the opposite end of that spectrum. Everything else is pointed the other direction. Get what you can, do what you can, develop as fast as you can, but wait, don't develop that fast. Wait, don't give me that many points. Good for you, Bryce Sensabaugh. I am not going to chastise you for screwing this up, screwing up the tank. I will. There's plenty of games in an NBA schedule that Will Hardy and ownership and everyone else can once again sit down 4 of the top 5 point scorers on the team, and it won't be a dysfunctional Heat squad across on the other side of the floor on the other bench, and this one will end up being a loss, and you'll fall back to the comfortable draft position that everyone's hoping for. So I will not sit here on these airwaves and be mad at young players for making the most of their opportunities, but it is on some level at least mildly comical to see when somebody like, you know how hard it is to go for 34 points in an NBA basketball game? I mean, I don't, in a practical sense, know how hard it is. I've never done it. I've never had to try to do it. But we can look at great players, long tenured players, guys with exceptional careers who never reached 34 points or who maybe a handful of times hit 34 points. And Sensabaugh, like they were saying on that highlight, is playing out of his mind against the Miami Heat squad that I mean, they're probably below the Mason-Dixon line of who you want to see the team lose to. I mean, the Heat are not good enough right now because of their disarray that you want to see the Jazz lose to them, I guess. But golly, what a weird scenario. Back-to-back wins for a Utah Jazz team that's not even really trying to win back-to-back games. Don't love it. Don't want to see it too often. 5th best odds to get this top pick in the lottery. Although the more the more jaded version of me says, like, spend a lot of time, abandon all hope that you're going to get Cooper Flag. And find somebody in the top end of this draft class that you're comfortable being like, all right, let's get that person at 5, because this is supposed to be a generational draft. This is supposed to be a really deep draft. This is supposed to be a place where at 4 or 5, which is where the Jazz are going to end up, even if they have the top odds for the number 1 lottery pick, I don't believe that the lottery falls in Utah's favor. I don't think that the league is going to manipulate things and the ping pong ball is going to be weighted a certain way to give it to you, like we saw with Patrick Ewing going to New York. I'm on the opposite end of that conspiracy. I think that if the NBA controls anything, and if the NFL controls anything, and if Major League Baseball manipulates anything, a market like this one, in a draft like this one, with a player like Cooper Flag, I don't know that even if you're the best team, even if you're the worst team with the best draft lottery odds, I just don't know if I even want to have that hope heading into lottery day. Because then you're just gutted when somebody else against the odds gets the number 1 overall pick. And I feel like that's what would happen with the Utah Jazz. You've got a new money owner who has come in, and the rest of the league is not yet certain how they want to feel about him, right? Maybe if it was like the Miller family had held on to this thing for 5 decades and the NBA was finally like, all right, you know what? They played good soldier for this entire time. Here's the little reward. Here's the feather in the cap. That's just if there's any manipulation to this system at all, and I think it's naive to think that that's not a possibility, are the Jazz really going to get the number 1 overall pick? So should the franchise make a concerted effort to have the worst record in the league, to be the number 1 worst team? I think you're more likely to be able to package some of your draft capital and the assets that you've accumulated over the lean years to try to move up. Probably not to number 1, but maybe up to 2, 3. Or, like I said, just find a place where you're comfortable, or find a player you're comfortable with grabbing at number 4 or number 5. I think that's your best hope. Good job, Bryce Sensabaugh. 34 points. Career high. Ouch. All right, the NFL draft order, as we look at the playoff picture, the NFL draft order, since we just talked about the NBA, is going to look like this. Where does your team sit? We'll discuss that next on the Sean O'Connell Show on the Monday after the NFL regular season has wrapped up. It's ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Pending trades, obviously, the NFL draft order is set, at least the top 18. Obviously, playoff teams will still have to slug it out, figure out where their final draft standing is. But for all the teams that are looking for a franchise-changing player, it goes like this. The Tennessee Titans pick number 1. They've got a lot of needs, and they've got an opportunity at number 1 to grab whoever ends up through the draft evaluation process as the number 1 overall quarterback, because they do need a quarterback. They also need pass rushers. They need an offensive tackle to protect whoever that quarterback is. The Tennessee Titans, unfortunately, and that's a franchise that I've always had some affection for whatever reason. Great stadium, even though they're building a new one. I liked the old one. Nashville's a wonderful town. This is a place where, as a quarterback right now, you probably don't want to go. And that's exactly where Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or whomever is probably going to end up. Now, one of the questions is whether or not, especially with Shedeur, although you should ask it with Cam Ward as well, because college players are now coming out of this environment where they've had so much control as college players that, the previous generations of guys did not have. It was a rarity when John Elway or when Eli Manning or whoever said, I don't want to play for that franchise. I'm going to sit out. I'm going to hold out. I don't want to be a Charger. I'll be a Giant, whatever. Like, that was a rarity back in the day. I wonder if it'll be more common now, because from the jump, from middle school, these guys now have an opportunity, most of them, to play where they want to play in high school. And then they have an opportunity in college to not only play where they want to play initially, but if things aren't perfect there, then they have an opportunity to go wherever else they want. And now, for the first time, basically, you're asking these guys to surrender their autonomy to an NFL draft process that, look, if I'm a 21-year-old guy, 22-year-old guy, and I get drafted and given $40 million to go live in Nashville, Tennessee, I'm excited about that. You know what kind of property you can buy in Nashville with that kind of a signing bonus? I mean, the cost of living there is better than Salt Lake. You could buy acreage, all right? You could have a really, really cool spot. But maybe you don't like honky tonks. Maybe you don't like country music. Maybe you don't want to be in a place like that. Maybe you feel as though you would rather be in a large media market. If you're Cam Ward, who went to Miami, maybe you don't love the idea of being in Nashville. If you're Shedeur Sanders and you've been in the cold and the snow of Boulder, you're just like, take me anywhere where it's not going to snow. His dad's going to have something to say about it too. And it's not going to be an ideal scenario for a quarterback right now, because your offensive line is shaky and there's not a ton of weapons for you to throw to. And the franchise's most recent personnel moves have seen them not re-signing or offloading talents that then go on elsewhere to have resurgence or better years or, a better fit. In the case of Derrick Henry, incredibly productive. You're looking at Tennessee and you're going like, I don't know if I have a lot of belief in how that franchise is run. All right. The Cleveland Browns are number 2. Take everything I just said about Nashville, except that the city is awesome. Apply it to Cleveland, and the same concerns are there. If you're a highly rated player, you don't want to be a Brown. That franchise is cursed and a mess. And even though Myles Garrett has found his success individually there, that guy is going to be he's going to be the defensive version of Joe Thomas, where he's the most respected player at his position in the entire league, and he doesn't have any meaningful wins to show for it. Rewind the show if you're listening to the podcast form. We were just talking about this with Garrett Bowles a couple hours ago. It's amazing to cash the check. It's amazing to have the All-Pro or the Pro Bowl honors, but these guys want to compete and they want to win. They want meaningful games on the slate. They want an opportunity to compete for division championships, conference championships, Super Bowl championships. And Myles Garrett at some point, I don't know when it's going to happen, but Myles Garrett at some point being the best pass rusher in the league, the second best pass rusher in the league, depending on the year, for however many years, is going to look around and just be like, all right, guys, I can't do it anymore. I've been the company man long enough. I've been the good soldier long enough. Get me the bleep out of here. Cleveland has a lot of needs, a lot of important needs. Not a wonderful place to be a quarterback if that's where they go at number 2. Number 3, the New York Giants. They're a miserable franchise right now. I am curious to see what the coaching situation ends up like with New York, with the Giants and with the Jets. They also need quarterbacks. The Daniel Jones era ended early in the season. Malik Neighbors, great player. Can you keep him happy? We talked about New England and the fact that they fired their head coach after exactly one season. Gerard Mayo, former player for the Patriots, out. Because they somehow found a way to beat the Bills in Week 18, they are now the number 4 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. They need offensive line help, edge rushing help. Jacksonville continues its wallowing in self-pity. The Raiders have some nice pieces. If you could keep Crosby in the fold, obviously Bowers from the Georgia tight end set the rookie record for receptions. Poor Puka Nacua. Poor Puka Nacua breaks a record, gets to keep it for one offseason, and then a tight end breaks it.
Yeah, that's what I was literally about to say. Like, poor Puka Nacua.
That reminds me of the Melvin Gordon, Samaje Perine in like single game rushing record situation. If you go back in college football, those two guys went for 400 plus yards in individual games a week apart. So I think it was Melvin Gordon that broke the record that had been like standing for 20 years. And then the very next week, Samaje Perine broke that record. That would be so aggravating. That would be like if Saquon Barkley hit Eric Dickerson's record this year, and then next year some yahoo came along and broke that.
Yep.
Not fun. Raiders are 6. The New York Jets sitting at number 7. Carolina at 8. New Orleans Saints at number 9. The Chicago Bears sitting at 10. And my San Francisco 49ers right behind them at 11. Caleb Williams took too many sacks this year, but his numbers were actually pretty good on a franchise that is rebuilding and not necessarily in a great spot personnel-wise. He has weapons that he can throw to. They need to figure out some things along the offensive line, and they need to certainly figure out things defensively. But the Bears, I am not out on Caleb Williams as a talent yet. He's not being favorably compared to this rookie quarterback class because, of course, Bo Nix took his team to the playoffs. Congratulations to all you Denver fans. We started the show talking about that. Jalen Daniels, of course, found a way to win the division in Washington, and they're headed to the playoffs. So there's a lot of hate right now for Caleb Williams, which, trust me, most of the time I'm on board with, but not necessarily today. Not this season, because he did some impressive things. And let's be honest, he's a rookie quarterback on a franchise that hasn't done anything spectacular in quite a while. Their division, by the way, is an absolute nightmare right now.
Yeah, look at the Lions and the Vikings right now. Packers.
Lions, they're all good.
They're all in the playoffs.
Lions are the best team in the NFC. All right? The Vikings are probably the best story in the NFL this year because of what happened with Sam Darnold's resurgence under Kevin O'Connell, who we're going to talk about a lot in the next segment, because there's the rumor mill in the NFL is churning as head coaching openings are happening and as teams saw their regular seasons come to a close. The trade market for NFL coaches might be at an all-time high. I know how strange it sounds, but you can trade for a coach in the NFL. There is precedent for it. We said this is what we saw this with Sean Payton.
Yep, I was about to literally say that.
So, is Kevin O'Connell going to be traded? There are teams who are going to offer, reports are, teams are going to offer some attractive packages to the Vikings to try to get Kevin O'Connell. I don't believe it. We're also going to talk about some of the best bonuses earned in the final week of NFL regular season play. Sean O'Connell Show. Hour number 3 begins next on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Zach keeps spinning on the ones and twos because these are the top songs from the Billboard charts in January of 2016, which is the last time the Denver Broncos, his favorite team, made the NFL playoffs. Congratulations to all you Bronco fans out there, and there's too many of you in Salt Lake City. But it's been long enough suffering that I won't relish your failures anymore, and I'll just say congratulations, because I think my San Francisco 49ers might be rounding into a time where there could be some lean years ahead. They got to figure out a very expensive and aging roster this offseason. So we'll see. Don't love the whole Brock Purdy situation either. Wanted to take an opportunity. The NFL regular season, remember, week 18, which is the 17th game because of buys and whatnot, right? This collective bargaining agreement, the last time they went to the table, the owners wanted an 18-game regular season. The players said, we'll give you 17. And the owners were like, all right, fine, we'll take what we can get. Eventually, you talk to anyone who's played in the NFL, you talk to anyone who's been part of these representative meetings, Jeff Schwartz, who joins us and will join us tomorrow, he's dead certain that 18 games is coming eventually. And that means that in the NFL, you're going to get a little bit more of this load management stuff that you see in the NBA. You saw plenty of it in Week 18 in the 17th game. You saw a lot of the teams who had sort of sealed their fate. They were resting players. Part of the reason, I hate to say it to you Bronco fans, part of the reason that you Broncos are in the playoffs for the first time in a decade is because the Kansas City Chiefs, their business was already done before Sunday.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're just going to rest body, and you guys can have this one.
And then the Broncos can beat Carson Wentz.
Even the Broncos could beat Carson Wentz. It was not the case for every game. You were treated last night to a Detroit Lions, Minnesota Vikings game that didn't end up being as close as I thought it would, but those were two teams battling it out for supremacy in their division. That was a very meaningful game in Week 17. So it's not going to be exactly analogous to like that pre-championship weekend in the SEC where everyone is like resting players and playing patsy schedules and things like that. You're going to still get some of these good games at the tail end of the NFL season because of how scheduling works. The Lions clinching the number 1 overall seed. They improved to 15-2 to match. They in the NFC have matched the Chiefs' supreme record in the AFC, and still the Lions chasing a Super Bowl with Dan Campbell, with Jared Goff. They're a great story. The Vikings are a great story, despite the fact that they came up short last night. 31-9 was not what I thought it was going to be. And Sam Darnold maybe read too many of his own press clippings. He did not have a great game, and not just in the numbers, but there were a couple of throws. The one in the end zone to Jefferson, you like he just missed him. And I don't know how it happens when a guy who's been so good, so accurate for the majority of the season, and just in a crucial game can't pull it together. You don't want the narrative to switch again on Sam Darnold because hopefully he has figured it out. His head is right. The system is right. The coach is right. And the marriage that he has found with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota is an interesting one because there are several reports out there right now that Kevin O'Connell is a hot commodity and that there are other teams that want him desperately and are willing to offer Minnesota real compensation in cash and picks to make it happen because Kevin O'Connell's contract is nowhere – well, he's got another year. And it's ironclad for that year. So this is always interesting when you talk about a coach being on the trading block. The Minnesota Vikings, and the only comment that they've made out of it is like, we love Kevin, we're not going to trade him. They would be silly, I think, to offer him up to anyone else unless it was like insane amounts of draft capital. And I don't know if there's anyone in the NFL who needs a head coach right now who's willing to part with player capital, even if you think Kevin O'Connell is the next thing, is the answer to your franchise's woes. This is a player-driven league. As much respect as you have to give to the coaches who've done it well, the ones who've done it for a long time, the ones who are kind of on the rise like Dan Campbell is, it's a player-driven league, so sacrificing player capital for a coach is probably not something that I would ever do. Even though we've seen it work out. We saw it work out with the Sean Payton trade, which was the most recent head coaching trade that happened. So NFL Week 18, you saw some interesting things, saw some fun things. And even in the games where teams were out of the playoffs, even where the record had already been decided, we alluded to this earlier when I was talking with Scott Mitchell. The bonus thing, the performance bonuses, the individual contract performance bonuses are something that can protect you and should be more a part of what we're seeing in the NBA now with the load management situation. It could protect us from having, as fans, to endure the boring nights, the off games, the excessive rest, the load management. The Seattle Seahawks made an executive decision at the front office level to let Geno Smith chase a $6 million bonus in his final regular season game. In a game where his team is already eliminated from the playoffs, they let their quarterback go after a $6 million bonus. I kind of understand looking at what he had to do. I kind of understand why they would say, like, yeah, he's probably not going to hit it. Let him play. Or maybe they said, we would like to see him hit it because he's done great things for us, even though we didn't make the playoffs this year. We want to maintain a good relationship with him. That's what Scott Mitchell said was probably the thinking. Watching these guys chase bonuses, performance bonuses, and to the level that their teams, even when a victory is sealed, are not kneeling it down. That wasn't the case with Geno Smith, who hit a $6 million bonus because he went over 70% completion. The number in his contract, 69.75% of his passes on the year had to be complete. He finished with 70.4%, I believe, which is a great number.
Yeah, it really is.
It's a phenomenal number, and that's why there was a $2 million bonus attached to it, right? So he hits that one. Geno Smith hits that one, and then he gets to 10 wins. He got an extra $2 million on his bonus if the team made the playoffs, which they did not, or won 10 games. So he gets another $2 million for that. And then the final $2 million bonus was attached to the 4,282 passing yards number. I would love, I don't know why I'm so curious about this, but I would love to know where that very specific number came from. If it was like 4,250, it would feel like it was a round number. If it was 4,000, it feels like it's a round number. 4,500 feels like it's a round number. Mm-hmm. I want to know where 4,282 came up. Like, what seasons did they add together and then divide to get an average where 4,282 yards was the number he had to reach in order to cash the bonus? He reached it. He hit all three of them in a game, and especially that completion percentage one. He had to be accurate in this game to do it. And he was. So his teammates were excited for him. The franchise has not said anything other than that they were happy and willing to pay it for him. So Geno Smith, can you imagine the amount of I know that a Super Bowl is a bigger deal, but for your individual life and career, maybe not for Geno Smith because he's been in the league for a long time, and if he spent his money correctly and invested correctly, $6 million probably doesn't change his life all that much one way or another, but $6 million is like real money.
It is.
Kyle Van Noy hit an escalator in his contract where he got an extra $250,000 because he got another sack. Like, again, $250,000, that's great, but for Kyle Van Noy, an extra $250,000 is like, okay, thank you, that's awesome. It's certainly not something to sneeze at, but he's made $47 million in his career. An extra $250,000 doesn't change his life. That's probably just like a nice gift for his wife. Yeah. That's like another car, and a really nice car that he can buy. But $6 million is a lot of money.
It is really insane. I'm curious too, is like when they're doing this bonus stuff, I wonder if they're like in a meeting, they're like, oh, you say a number, and then you say a number, and then we'll collide together and make that number.
I guarantee, right? Like when the agent and the team sit down, and obviously the agent communicates with the player, the agent's got to be like, okay, Geno, how many yards do you think you can pass for this year? And he's probably like, I'm definitely going to go over 4,000. All right, we're going to put an escalator in your contract for 4,000 yards. And then the team says, no. 4,000 is too easy. He's going to hit 4,000. He's hit 4,000 before. We want it to be 4,500. Well, then if you met in the middle, if it was just as simple as that, it would be, all right, 4,250, we'll meet in the middle. But 4,282 had to come from somewhere, and I want to know where it is.
Me too.
And to keep going with your question, so like Von Miller got another $1.5 million bonus because he hit his 6th sack of the year.
Wow.
All right? Now, Von Miller is an aging player. He's getting a little bit older, but 6 sacks is a very, very attainable number for Von Miller.
I 100% agree with you.
So seeing the way that certain teams structure these things, I got to believe that the Seattle Seahawks did not think they were going to have to pay all $6 million of that $6 million bonus to Geno Smith.
Yeah.
They probably were like, all right, we hope he gets us to 10 wins. We're happy to pay the $2 million if he does that. We're probably in the playoffs. Or we give him $2 million if he's in the playoffs. Like that's a bonus that a team says, all right, great. Happy to do it.
Right.
The 70% completion percentage, because basically if you round up a little bit, that's where it's at. That's one they're probably like, I don't know if we're going to have to pay that one out. Put it in there, but that one doesn't feel all that likely. 42-82 maybe doesn't feel all that likely either. But these numbers, they came up with these numbers. They signed off on these numbers. And I think it's most important to note, they let him go out there and chase these numbers. There are plenty of teams, plenty of franchises, and we've heard plenty of stories about this, where a guy is not given an opportunity to chase a number. You know what? We should get Weddle on the phone, because he had one of these in his contract when he was with Baltimore, where I think it was if he hit a certain win total, if the team hit a certain win total, he had $1 million bonus. Or no, you know what it was? 877-353-0700, if you can remember what this was. There was $1 million bonus in Eric Weddle's contract that I can't remember if it was a team incentive or if it was a personal incentive where he had to get an interception. And I think he got the interception, but then it came back on a penalty. Or maybe the win came back on a penalty. All I remember is that he hit the $1 million bonus, and then there was a penalty, and that took the bonus away from him. So it was $1 million penalty.
I think it was an interception. I think it was.
Right? I think it was when he was in Baltimore.
Yeah.
It was an interception, I think, and he got the interception, and then it was like a kind of a ticky-tack defensive hold or something, brought the interception back, and that meant that he doesn't get the stat, and, of course, he doesn't get the $1 million that go with the stat. I think that's what it was. I'll have to ask him about it. But, gosh, that would be painful. Von Miller getting $1.5 million for his 6th sack. And, by the way, earlier in the year, they had an escalator in his contract where he got $1 million bonus when he hit 2 sacks. All that is a team saying, look, man, we're happy to pay you this money, but we're only going to pay you this money if you're on the field. Like, we will pay the asking price for Von Miller, but we just need to make sure you're actually playing for us. Because Von Miller, of course, is going to get 2 sacks.
Easily.
Von Miller, even at this point in his career, rolls out of bed, and if he's healthy for all these games, he's going to get 2 sacks. So a lot of guys have these escalators in their contracts for, like, you know, being on the active roster for a certain number of weeks. But these individual stat ones are fun to look at. And maybe the most exciting one was watching Mike Evans, again, team eliminated from the playoffs, watching Mike Evans tie Jerry Rice's 1,000-yard seasons record. 11 seasons in a row, Mike Evans has now hit 1,000-yard seasons. The last offensive play of the game, because they could have gone victory formation. Tampa could have knelt it out and said, we're done. Sorry, you didn't quite get there. And instead, they wanted to let their guy hit the bonus that came with it. And it was a significant bonus. $3 million for Mike Evans. If he was able to cash that, if he was able to make it happen. And I said the Saints were eliminated from the playoffs in this one. The Buccaneers did make the playoffs, but still not good enough for them to just kneel it out. They wanted to because this is history. This is a guy on their team who's been a foundational staple member of their franchise going into the record books alongside the GOAT, along the all-time best wide receiver in the game, Mike Evans, 11,000-yard seasons in a row. And he gets a big bonus because of it, and his teammates were ecstatic for him. Everyone was celebrating. The fact that everybody knew what was at stake there and everyone knew what was going on there, and I don't think that the defense allowed it to happen. I don't think this was a Strahan-Favre sack situation. It was just Baker Mayfield knew he had to get the ball to his guy. You had to let him get an extra 5 yards. He gets it, and he joins Jerry Rice in the record books as one of 2 guys who've ever done it that consistently, that well, for that long. And Mike Evans, when it's all said and done, I don't think is going to be talked about like Jerry Rice has talked about, but to be alongside him in the record books is massively important for a guy's legacy, and obviously, in this particular case, massively important for his checkbook as well. And the reason, well, one of the many reasons I wanted to focus on all these numbers, including the Kyle Van Noy number, because it's great to see a dude with local connections continuing to do it at such a high level. These performance reward bonuses that are in NFL contracts are one of the potential solutions to the woes of NIL problems in college football. Incentive-based compensation makes so much sense to protect teams from the situations that they're finding themselves in. Now, I don't know if Cam Rising got a dime of what he was supposed to get this year. I have no idea, because it's not a direct relationship with the school and the player and the NIL collective. I don't know if there's guardrails and protections for both parties in there. I don't know if there's like, hey, Cam, if you're injured again, you're not going to get this money. I do know, though, that if you had to pay out in the last couple of seasons, you had to pay out a bunch of money to a guy who was unfortunately injured and not able to play, that is detrimental to what you can do NIL-wise for the active players on your roster, for the guys who are still doing it, for the guys who are contributing on game day. And in the Cam Rising situation, as I've said on the show before, if all that happened was he got paid back over the last couple of years for the Pac-12 championship seasons when he was not being compensated, it's still a fair deal for the University of Utah.
No, 100%.
Like, if Cam Rising made $3 million over the past 2 years in NIL money, and he only gave you whatever the total is, he gave you 0 games last year, and he gave you like 3.5 this year, it's still an even trade, whatever that dollar amount is. You didn't overpay Cam for 2 Pac-12 championships, all right? So I think that most of us have come to terms with all that. But to protect the franchise, so to speak, to protect a team and an NIL collective from just like, I don't know. I truly don't know. I don't know if injuries are written in. And injuries are not the only thing, by the way, that affects a guy's performance. Like, I didn't want to keep singling this guy out, but I'm going to prove this point. Lander Barton this year I thought was going to be an All-American linebacker at Utah. I don't know what Lander Barton's NIL package is, but the team would be foolish to not be giving that guy some money, right? Mm-hmm. In the last 3-4 games, he started to play like I thought he was going to play all year. But if you're talking about the entire body of work, you probably, maybe overpaid Lander Barton for his actual statistical contributions this year. For his actual gameplay, he maybe got a little bit overcompensated because he didn't play all that well. He didn't play at an All-American level, and I imagine that he was one of the guys who was like, yeah, dude, we know you're a great player. We're going to pay you like you're a great player. So how do you fix something like that where a player expectation and a coach expectation don't necessarily meet up and don't necessarily match up? Well, you do it like the Von Miller situation. The risk here is if you do that, if you write performance bonuses into an NIL compensation or into like the straight up revenue sharing compensation model that we're looking at in the very near future in college football. If you put those two things in there, there might be a team that says, well, at the University of Oregon, we don't have to predicate our contributions to your bank account based on your contributions to this football team. We're just going to pay you because we have the money to pay you. So you might end up losing guys to a team like that. But I just don't think that there are enough rosters, that there are enough programs with bottomless bank accounts that this doesn't become a model that is adoptable and workable in college football. It's already out there, I'm sure, for several schools. But if you start 6 games, you get your $600,000. If you start 12 games, then you get your $1 million. If you get 12 sacks, you get another $1 million in NIL, whatever it is. Because then, like these NFL franchises are seeing, then you're getting your money's worth. Von Miller's contract, Mike Evans' contract, Geno Smith's contract is kind of the weird one because they put $6 million in there based on these numbers that said, well, if he hits these numbers, we're in the playoffs. And then weirdly, because of how it worked in the NFC with how good the NFC North is specifically, there was no room for wild cards in the NFC West. There was no room for Seattle to take an extra playoff spot. And Geno Smith, despite a 10-win season and 70% completion and over 4,282 yards, despite all that, his team's not in the playoffs. So this incentive-based model for Seattle didn't work out the way that they probably wanted or needed it to. But the Von Miller one, I mean, that's just saying, hey, are you on the field? Are you playing? If so, we know you're going to hit these numbers, and that's when we're going to give you that money. So I want this to be the thing, the model that exists at BYU, that exists at Utah, that exists at Arizona State. This is the way that you protect college football franchises, college basketball franchises, because unfortunately that's what they are now, from destroying themselves with overspending, from bad investment. You get your GM and your NIL collective and the agents of these players, and you say, here's the deal. You have guaranteed compensation. We know that just to commit to play at Utah, it's going to cost us, whatever, $500,000 to get you here to be our starting running back. I don't know what the numbers are looking like right now. But I'm going to give you more if you end up rushing for 10 touchdowns. I'm going to give you more. That is the spirit, and you can make it the letter of the NIL law. You are more valuable, and you are now more endorsable, and your name, your image, and your likeness are now more fruitful for this team, so here's some extra money because of it. It was fun to watch these players chasing their bonuses at the end of the season. And you know what? It would be a blast if these things were public in college football as well, and they were public during the season in the NFL. And if you could take bets on whether or not so-and-so is going to hit that, because that's what it is. It's a bet by the team that I don't think – I'm betting $6 million that Geno Smith doesn't hit all these numbers. And if he does, I'm happy to pay it because it works out for us. I'm betting $1 million that Bo Nix can't get this team to the playoffs. If he does, I'm happy to give him $1 million. Let the fans bet on it too. Let's monetize this thing and boom, funnel it right back into the program. Sean O'Connell Show, Those are my ideas on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.
Third drive, 17th play of this drive coming. Nick's rolling to his right, has some running room, now throws back in the end zone, batted up in the air, nearly intercepted, and it's caught. It was juggled and caught for a touchdown. Devon Vele. Bo Nix was looking for Adam Troutman in the back of the end zone. It was deflected up in the air, went off one of the Kansas City Chiefs, and then off Bailey into his hands for a touchdown. A spectacular grab. That's clean living when it's all going right for you. The Denver Broncos get a wild tic-tac-toe kind of possession of the end zone, and in the end, the Broncos have it for 6. Wow.
Steve Levy on the call. That highlight courtesy of ESPN Radio. Devon Vele with a big catch. 38-0 victory for the Broncos over the Chiefs, who were resting everybody. Broncos clinched the final playoff berth in the AFC with that win. What a weird situation for the Chiefs to be in, by the way, where they have to help a divisional rival out by sitting their players, but of course helping yourself is more important than hurting a divisional rival. And the Broncos are at this point no real threat to the Chiefs, so they're probably like, whatever. But what a weird thing. You rest your guys, that helps a divisional rival make the playoffs. Broncos will take on the Bills in Buffalo this coming Sunday. We'll have that game as part of a wild card triple header right here on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Wild card weekend, of course, one of the best weekends of sports viewing in the sports calendar, period, every single year. And you heard the music coming in. That was 2016, the last time the Broncos made the playoffs. Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, I'm still going to put him in there. Part of a great, strong rookie class of quarterbacks. Jaden Daniels in particular, setting some rookie records and taking the Washington Commanders back to the playoffs. Number 6 seed in the NFC. They have not been in the playoffs since 2020, so not quite the same drought that the Broncos have experienced. But Jaden Daniels looks like he is a franchise player. He is the future of a Commanders franchise that they're not quite the Cleveland Browns in the quarterback department, but there are plenty of folks who were buying starting quarterback jerseys every year or every other year for that Washington football franchise. And now I think we're safe in saying that this guy is going to be wearing that jersey as the starting QB in Washington for a very long time. So some changing winds right now in the NFL world when it comes to the actual playoff picture.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you got any like special playoff plans? It's those of us who've been cheering for good teams for the last several years. We've like kind of had to ramp up our playoff football, our snacks, our food menu to get to that Super Bowl. And now I don't have to do that for the 49ers. So it's been a long time since you've had to prepare yourself for some playoff football viewing with the Denver Broncos. What are you going to do?
I'm actually going to be working at my other job, actually.
All right. Well, do you have a television visible?
Yeah. So
okay. Beautiful.
I'm a sushi chef, and then sushi bar, there's like 4 TVs above.
Okay.
So I can just turn around and look. But it's the funny thing, too, is that one of my coworkers, who's one of the servers, is a Buffalo fan.
So you're going to have like a friendly wager?
Probably.
Or an unfriendly wager?
Probably.
Okay.
I hope so.
Okay. 877-353-0700. Let's come up with a wager that Zach and his fellow sushi chef coworker can. What kind of wager can you put on the line here for a Broncos-Bills playoff matchup? First of all, are we going straight money line, or are you going to ask for the points because the Bills are a pretty big favorite?
Probably just straight money line.
Okay. Oh, boy.
I'll be smart.
Okay.
Be smart.
I don't know if that's smart, but we'll – okay. I'm going to propose this. Loser has to line their nostrils with wasabi for the shift.
Ooh.
Do you guys do the real wasabi or like the –
We do both.
Oh, man.
We do both.
See? That could get nasty. Would you be able to work if you had snorted wasabi because you lost that bet?
Probably. I mean, I've made wasabi before. I'm like, my nostrils are like so used to it. I'm like,
So you'd be fine.
Probably.
Potentially.
Probably. I mean,
okay, how about this? Because that might get too much mucus, and we don't want that involved with the sushi.
Yep.
But let's say, what's a good size? What's a good, like, What's a good chunk of wasabi? What's a good sized ball of wasabi? Like a golf ball? We need to go smaller than that. Like the regular chunk that they put on my plate for sushi, you just got to eat that thing straight. If you lose the bet, would that even bother you folks that are so used to wasabi?
I personally have never eaten wasabi. Like I don't really use wasabi, but
okay, me neither. I think it makes everything taste like wasabi, and
exactly.
My problem when I'm eating sushi with the whole like wasabi soy thing is then everything just tastes like wasabi and soy.
Yes.
I want to taste the fish. I want to taste the actual roll.
Mm-hmm.
I want to taste the sushi, so I don't do that. But anyway, that's probably the wrong way to do it, but that's how I do it. So this is the bet, okay? Whoever loses has to eat, and I'll let you determine how big the chunk is, but you have to eat like a big old wad of wasabi, whoever loses.
That's a fair bet.
All right. That's my nomination, 877-353-0700, if you want to offer yours. We did get an interesting text. In our last segment, 0626, as we were talking about the NFL bonuses, performance bonuses that these players were chasing, and you saw like earnest participation from teams even in playoff elimination scenarios, even in the case where Geno Smith could not make the playoffs. He was giving his damnedest because he wanted those bonuses. He hit the trifecta. He got $6 million because of it. This coming in from 0626. One thing that absolutely needs to be included in NIL deals is no hitting the transfer portal until the entire season is over. And you must play in the postseason, whether in the playoffs or in a chump bowl game you're playing. I love it. And you know what? Maybe that's why we saw Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter playing in their bowl game.
Possibly.
I think it might be more than that. I think it might just have been kind of a cultural statement from Deion and them wanting to finish out something that they started and bolstering their resume for the NFL, not necessarily from a film perspective, but from a, hey, you cannot question whether or not I love football. Because that's one of the things that these talented guys, that's a curse that gets thrown at them. I don't know how much he loves football. That was a Caleb Williams conversation point, right? When the draft process was happening with him, people were saying, I don't know if he really loves football. Yeah, he's talented. He's a great player, but does he really love the game? Is he really like all the way bought in on the game? You can't ask that question right now about Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders, because if you do ask the question, they just point to the Alamo Bowl and say, what are you talking about? Don't I love football? That game was meaningless. That meant nothing to me, and I played in it. So I think that might have had might have been part of the reason why they played in that game. But maybe they had some NIL deals that already had that language in there.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if you're gonna take this, Rolls Royce that we're giving you. No, he drives a Maybach SUV, right? That's what Shedeur drives. He drives a Maybach SUV, I think. If you're gonna drive this, if our car dealership's gonna give this to you as part of your compensation, you need to be playing every single game. Maybe that's already in there. The NIL deals are going to be really interesting moving forward because teams are going to have to try to protect themselves. And if there's any hope for return on investment at all, there's going to be a lot more of the Bryce Underwood things where it's just like, dude, we're going to give you a multi-year deal. That's how much we believe in you. Now, you're going to miss on some of those, but you're not going to offer them to the run-of-the-mill kids. I think Tennessee gave Nico Iamaleava, I think they gave him like a 4-year deal. I don't know how ironclad it is. I don't know how locked in he truly is. But thanks for the text, 0626.
Yeah,
I like that. I like saying, hey, not only do you have to play in the bowl game too.
Yeah, and another thing I was going to say is, like, why doesn't the transfer portal open after like the spring game that each school plays?
Well, that's what
that makes more
needs
sense
to happen. The spring transfer portal should be the only transfer portal. It's not right now, and I don't know what it would look like if you tried to make it the only transfer portal. I know that coaches at some point said they wanted it to be reduced to one.
Mm-hmm.
The December one is such a chaotic time, so maybe coaches are like already in that mode. They're like, fine, just give me all the chaos at once so I can make my life a little bit easier in the spring. I don't know. Let's see what 9142 says. It takes a cardiologist 14 years of education and training to make $400,000 to $600,000 a year. We are now giving 5-star players with 0 college snaps $600 plus. Also, adults can be happy that their teams won. Adults ruining all college sports. It's an interesting stance to take. First of all, cardiologists, I think, are undercompensated if they're only making $400 to $600. Because, golly, what a specialist. What a unbelievably important position. But that's not the point of the text from 9142. The thing about giving 5-star players with no college snaps hundreds of thousands of dollars, and whether it's $100,000 or it's $1 million, the thing about it is we have to get used to the idea that these athletes were uncompensated, or not uncompensated, were undercompensated for a very, very long time. My only umbrage, the only problem I have with the NIL system is that somehow the NCAA and somehow the universities figured out a way to pass the buck on compensation for a couple more years. Now, it's all coming home to roost with this revenue sharing situation that we've got coming in a few months. But even then, the number looks like it's going to be $18 to $22 million of revenue. And I get it. You got to do that because of the whole, sustainability thing. But the wildest thing ever was that even when the writing was on the wall that eventually athletes were going to have to be compensated, somehow the NCAA convinced everyone, well, you know who's going to do it? The private citizen. You know who's going to compensate the athletes? The boosters. You know who's going to give them money? The fans are going to contribute to collectives. Like, what? Are we serious? That's the dumb part about this. Players getting paid and the adults in the room ruining college sports by paying players, I don't necessarily view it 100% that way. The only real problem with it is that there's no actual organized real method to it. We would not, I promise you, we would not be having conversations about college sports being ruined if 10 years ago the NCAA was just like, you know what, guys, this is a battle we're going to lose eventually. Let's make this a developmental pro sport. I promise we would be having much different conversations if they said 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when Ed O'Bannon and company got together and were just like, hey, this is BS, we need to be compensated. If at that time the NCAA had started to prepare a way to transition into what we have now, then college sports would not be quote-unquote ruined. They would be different, but they would not be quote-unquote ruined, because what happened here was the litigious nature of the battle became so heavy that eventually the government stepped in and said, look, NCAA, you can't control this anymore, removed all the power, and then there was a leadership vacuum, and to fill that void, who stepped in? Boosters, money, random agents. Paying players $600,000 because they're good at high school football is not something that makes sense when you just look at this like tiny little dot. However, when you zoom out and you see that those same guys eventually are going to be putting $100,000 or 100,000 butts in the seats at the big house in Michigan, then you say, oh, wait, maybe that 18-year-old deserves $600,000 because look at all the revenue that his efforts are producing for the University of Michigan or for Ohio State or for whoever. Cardiologists probably deserve to be paid more. Teachers deserve to be paid more. pretty much every position that I can think of that's involved in any kind of service at all probably deserves to be paid more, but it doesn't mean that college athletes deserve less or don't deserve what they're getting now. All right. Got to take a break. We'll finish things out with hopefully a little crosstalk with Spence Checketts. I've got some trivia for you. We'll give away tickets to the Utah Auto Expo coming up January 17th through the 20th at the Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. So get ready with your texting figures to answer my question. And before we get there, I want to remind you, ESPN 792.1 FM, the cash kickoff is here. It's time for your shot to win $1,000 cash to pay your bills. All you have to do is text DOE to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win. 508-777-1000, nationwide contest for $1,000. Text DOE to 508-777-1000. Wrapping it up on the Sean O'Connell Show next on ESPN 700. 877-353-0700. 2 tickets to the Utah Auto Expo, January 17th through 20th at Mountain America Expo Center. If you can answer this question. Von Miller cashed a bonus for hitting his 6th sack of the season. How big was that bonus? We talked about that earlier on the show today. 6th sack of the year for Von Miller. Got him how much money? 877-353-0700 for those tickets to the Utah Auto Expo. The Drive with Spence Checketts is coming up next. He joins me now for a little crosstalk. Hi, Spence. Hello, Sean. We'll need his microphone to be on. Hello? Well, I promise he's here. Just give me some sign language, Spence, and I'll translate for you. He's waving hello, everybody.
Can't do the second part.
Can't do the second.
I told you, my everlasting Christmas wish as a radio host here at Broadway Media is to one day have access to control my microphone and the microphones in the studio. Your mic is now off.
We have buttons
There
that
you
just
go.
don't do anything, really.
The buttons make us feel important, though, because you can, during the break, we're on YouTube, watch. We're hitting all the buttons. They do nothing, though. They do absolutely nothing. How are you, man?
I'm good. How was your weekend?
I was good. A lot of NFL football. Really impressed because I've been off the Lions only because of how many dudes they have hurt defensively. But last night kind of changed my mind a little bit. And I was thinking about this. Whenever a team in a city is able to rise up and do something that hasn't been done in a long time, I just think of it through the prism of the Jazz. Because that was probably the biggest football game in the city of Detroit in decades. Decades and decades and decades. 40, 50 years is what people have been saying this morning. And to see how much that meant to Lions fans, and then after the game, watching Dan Campbell address his team, he's a hard guy not to like, no matter what you think about his coaching acumen. He's done a hell of a job. And, I always just kind of think about what that would mean if the Jazz ever really figured it out to the point where they were back, where they were in the late 90s, actually throwing punches with the best teams in the league. And in my opinion, in 1998, having the best team in basketball, they just lost to the best basketball player of all time.
The thing also with the Lions that maybe gives hope to some Jazz fans is no one on paper would have said, well, when you get Jared Goff to be your starting quarterback, that's going to be the resurgence, right? So it doesn't always happen the way you think it's going to happen, and it doesn't have to be Cooper Flagg, what everyone is hoping for, right? Things can happen. I mean, the Vikings didn't think they were going to have this year because Sam Darnold showed up, So we don't know anything in sports until it happens.
Well, and to your point, around here, it's only happened when unexpected things manifested themselves as special. John and Carl, late first-round pick. Donovan, late lottery. Gobert, late first. Darren was a top 5 pick. But more often than not, Hayward, late lottery. More often than not, when the Jazz have been good, it has been because of the unexpected turning into something that nobody saw coming. So we'll see.
A bit non sequitur and going backwards, but you talked about how much that game meant to Detroit fans. Mm-hmm. Meant a lot to Minnesota fans also. Did you see what the Minnesota ownership did?
I did not.
This is so fantastic from a franchise. It's a very college football move from the NFL, which I love to see because it gets so callous and professionalized all the time.
Sure.
Right? So Minnesota went to the secondary market, like the team itself.
Okay.
Went to the secondary market and bought 1,900 lower bowl tickets.
Okay.
Most of them, because it was such an impactful game, at like $1,000 a seat plus, and then offered and sold them back to their season ticket holders for $200.
That's brilliant.
So they took like a $2 million bath so that there would be more Vikings fans in Detroit for the game. But how cool is that?
That's cool, yeah.
For a franchise to do for their season ticket holders against a divisional opponent in a super meaningful game. Love to see it.
I also was thinking about, because it was Frank Layden's 93rd birthday over the weekend, and, you hear the whole, the team is in the embodiment of the coach's personality all the time. It feels like the Lions really are.
They are.
Right? It feels like the Lions really are. And it always felt like Utah football, with their best years, they're an extension of Kyle, and BYU an extension of Kalani. Sometimes you hear that and you kind of roll your eyes, and it makes you wonder, okay, does winning just allow you to say things like the culture rules and you're an extension of the coach? Because nobody thinks Utah football was an extension of Kyle this year, but typically they are. And it just made me think of all the silly things we say once a team starts winning, when the bottom line is you got some good players, you figured it out, you started winning, and then talking heads in the media and fan bases like they embody the personality of their coach.
It's perfect.
But the Lions really do under Dan Campbell. So excited for the NFL playoffs.
And the Chiefs kind of do under Andy Reid too.
Feels like it.
It does feel like if it's an adage, it's a true one.
Right. I mean, like the Jets, did they embody Robert Saleh? I don't know. Maybe they did. Maybe that was the problem.
Yeah, Robert Saleh, turns out when you really sit him down, is very dysfunctional as a human being.
Nailed it. Maybe that's exactly how it went down.
Maybe we need to look at that for losing franchises, right? Hey, sir, this is an embodiment of you and your personality. You need to seek professional help.
You're either going to lose your job or you're going to therapy because the team is an extension of you.
Okay. What's coming up on the drive?
I'm going to talk a lot of NFL, talk a lot of the weekend now behind us. Of course, this is the day every year where coaches lose their jobs, coordinators lose their jobs. I think we have a great wild card slate. Jazz won a couple of games. There have been a couple of bright spots. Utah basketball is still active. Not good. BYU gets smoked by Houston. I've been watching a lot of Big 12 basketball. I got to say, man, I honestly don't know how Craig's going to get this done. We're going to talk about it on the show because I think, you see some of the online stuff. Every time there's an article written about Utah basketball, you go read the comment, and typically not a ringing endorsement of the head coach. They are so far behind in talent. If you watch the games, this is not – Craig has won wherever he's been, okay? And it's just a continuation of the topic that we had at the end of the football season, and that is the athletic department in the right spot to be able to do whatever it is? And if it's writing checks, period, it's writing checks, period. I don't think it's only that, but I think it's partially that. But the basketball program right now is running into somewhat of the same situation as the football team did, where once the top-end depth was gone, the football team just didn't have the talent to keep up. And the basketball team, look, the Big 12 is they would not compete in the Mountain West this year. I'm sorry. Like, that's how far the gap is so far as far as what we've seen. So, and obviously Final Four college football. So what we do on the show every day, Brian McGee, ESPN, is going to stop by. We have Amy Donaldson. We have Tom Haberstroh. So good guest list on a Monday.
Stay tuned for the drive with Spence Checketts. And then when his show is over, stay tuned for the remainder of the FCS National Championship game, Montana State, North Dakota State. Make sure you give those 1AA guys their love. It's the Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM, proud part of Utah's ESPN radio network.